combs or hand cards? What is the difference and which one should you use? These are wool combs. They have long, rather terrifying tines. They sort of resemble a hair comb, although I would never try to use it on my hair. The points are sharp and very dangerous. More on that later when we get to some of the fascinating history of these tools. Combs come in various configurations to serve different purposes. The number of rows of tines are called a pitch. So you can find single pitch, two pitch, or more. I have to enunciate pitch very carefully. There can also be variation in the spacing between the tines, how close they are to each other within each row. These variances determine what type of wool the combs are best suited to process. The closer the tines, the finer the wool. It also affects how the wool is processed. Will the combs separate or blend the wool? We will go deeper into that in a moment, but first, let's talk about hand cards and what those are. These are hand cards. They are basically shaped like paddles with handles. On the surface of the paddle, you will find the carding cloth. It is a bunch of small wired teeth that are set into a backing, which is then secured to the paddle. In ye olden times, the backing cloth was made of leather. In times past, people would store their combs with raw fleece squashed between the paddles. This was to keep the leather conditioned and protected between the seasons of wool carding. It would also prevent rust from forming on the teeth of the cards. Interestingly, this bit of wisdom has persisted even though modern hand cards don't need to condition the rubber backing, and the teeth are now made of stainless steel, so rust isn't really an issue either. Today, hand cards can come in different forms. Some are flat, some are curved, and some hand cards intended for processing cotton have shorter paddles. That's this part right here. You will also find options for the TPI, or tines per inch. The more teeth the cards have, the better they are for finer wools. The fewer the teeth, the better for medium grade wools. I have a fleece here from Ranching Tradition Fiber from Montana. This is a Targhee Rambouillet cross sheep. I have scoured this wool, and you can watch how I did that on my fleece to sweater tier over on my Patreon if you're interested. I'm going to process some of this wool with my combs and then some more with my hand cards. I'll spin up a sample of each, and you will be able to see how the processing affects the final yarn. We will do that in just one moment, but first I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Skillshare. I have been working with Skillshare for several months now, and that is because I have been enjoying my Skillshare membership so much, and I'm very glad to share them with all of you. Skillshare is an online learning community featuring thousands of online classes that you can watch ad-free to find inspiration and take your next step in your creative journey. And lately, I have been leveling up my videography and editing skills. Oh, hi there! So Skillshare really has something for everyone, doesn't it? Yep, I took a class called Video Editing with Adobe Premiere Pro for Beginners by Jordy Vanderput, and I learned some new techniques for video editing that I'm having lots of fun with. Skillshare has given us a link to share with you. It is in the video description below. The first 1,000 people to use the link will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. I'm sure you will enjoy the new skills you learn as much as I have. Now let's get back to our video. Okay, but who's going to card the wool? You or me? I'll let you do it. This was your video idea. Thank you so much. I know how much you love carding wool, so that means a lot to me. That's okay. I have some buckthorn berries to go and get ready for a natural dye project. Well, have fun, and remember to wear gloves or your fingers are going to turn purple again. You know I won't. Let's start with the combs. I have several different styles of combs. Most of my combs are from Indigo Hound, but I also have a set of Valkyrie fine combs. Combs are a little harder to find for purchasing than hand cards seem to be, but I will share some links in the video description if you are interested in purchasing a set of combs. I'll have some links there for hand cards as well. Combs are going to do one main thing for you. That is to align the fibers so they are all laid out in the same direction. This is the basic preparation for spinning a worsted yarn. Worsted yarn is dense and has a smoother surface. This allows it to hold up against abrasion very well, such as the abrasion caused by a heddle or a reed during the weaving process. In addition to aligning the fibers, the combs will also remove vegetable matter, or VM for short. They will separate out any short cuts of wool as well as neps. If you want the cleanest possible product, combs are the way to go. Also, a special thing to consider is this. If you have a dual-coated fleece, such as Icelandic or Shetland, and you want to separate the inner and outer coats, then you will want combs that have at least 2 pitch and have the tines that are closer together. However, if you want to blend the inner and outer coats, for instance, the tog and the thell of an Icelandic fleece to spin a lopi yarn, then using combs that have the tines further spaced and single pitch will do more blending and less separating. Generally, combs are best suited to processing longer fibers. The history of wool combing goes back a long way. Because of the construction of wool combs, it was a simpler and more effective tool to manufacture compared to hand cards. You can see in this image from 1442 a wool comber who is using coals to heat the metal tines of his combs. This would help them slide into the greasy wool easily. This is the fleece that I will be combing and carding for my samples today. This wool is about 3 inches, and that's a little shorter than what I usually like to use the combs for. But this fleece also has some VM in it, and I'd like for you to see the difference in how the cards and the combs get the VM out or don't. The first thing I do when I start combing, it's called lashing. So you're going to put the wool onto the combs, and I am using my Valkyries. I'm using the fine Valkyries. That means that the tines are fairly close together, and these are 2-pitch combs. You don't want to load it too high up the combs. You need to have a little working room. You don't want things spilling off the top while you are combing. The next thing I'm going to do is start at the tip and work my way deeper and deeper into the lock. I hold it up like this for the camera, but really you want to have your hand holding the comb kind of anchored on your leg. That takes a little of the stress off of your wrist. If you feel like you've gone as far as you can one way, you can flip it over and go the other way. And if what you have on the comb that's left is short bits but not dirty bits, you can take those short bits and use them later for carding. But if they're dirty bits, then they might be better as compost or bedding or stuffing or something like that. And then we do the same on the other side. So essentially both ends of the locks get combed out. I'm seeing a lot of neps and dirt in that bit, so I probably won't use that for carding. There's still some clumps in here, so I might give it just one more pass. When the wool has been transferred from one comb to the other enough times that you feel that it has become clean, this is when you can use a diz, or you can just pull it yourself and work it off of the comb into a floof noodle. One of the things about combs is that they are so sharp and there's a lot of movement going on, and just one wrong move can really draw blood. I've done it before, I know. And so if you have small children, or if you have feisty and curious cats or other pets, you really need to be careful with the combs because they can be very dangerous. As an example of how dangerous they can be, there's a rather gruesome story. The patron saint of wool combers is Bishop Blaise, who lived from 289 to 316. He is said to have been martyred by having his flesh removed by wool combs. So that's, if you purchase wool that is labeled comb top, wool top, or sliver, that will have been combed in a mill so that the fibers are all aligned and ready for worsted spinning. This method of spinning is called worsted spinning, and it's a good fit for that combed sliver or combed wool top. The goal of worsted spinning is to smooth the yarn out as you go along and to squash out any air that might be hiding in the fibers. We want everything to be compact and smooth, and we do that by keeping the twist between our front hand, or our drafting hand, that's this hand right here, and the spinning wheel. There's no twist building up between my hands at all. And my fiber supply hand is very, very lightly holding onto the fiber, just enough to draft out the fibers that I need as I spin along. I want to make it very clear that there are a myriad techniques, and you don't have to strictly spin worsted from combed wool. For example, you may want to spin from the fold. I have another video demonstrating spinning from the fold, and we'll have it linked at the end of this video if you are interested. So now that we have explored the combs, let's take a look at hand cards. Hand cards are a more recent invention than combs, relatively speaking. The earliest hand cards are recorded in France later in the 13th century. This image from around 1300 to 1340 is one of the earlier depictions of hand cards that we have. Modern hand cards can be flat or curved and may have more tines per inch for fine wools and cotton, or fewer tines per inch for coarser wool. Hand cards are best for shorter fibers, although as always there are exceptions. The goal of hand carding is to open up any clumps of wool and allow VM to fall out during the carding process. But be aware that carding will not remove VM as well as combing. Carding fluffs up the wool, and when the wool is removed from the hand card, it is rolled up into a squishy, airy cylinder, which is then ready for woolen long draw spinning. This little floof noodle is called a rollag. It is spun from the end, and as the wool is drawn into the yarn, it will have an intentionally disorganized alignment of the fibers. When we use hand cards, we want to load the hand card, one of them, with wool. We don't want to overload it, but we do want to have enough. How much that is, it might take a little practice to figure out. But once we have the wool on the hand card, then we are going to start to brush across the top of the hand card with the other hand card, and we want to transfer the wool from one card to the other. And we're not digging those tines down inside of each other, we're just kind of scraping across the top, but as it does that, it picks up the wool and transfers it to the other hand card. There are so many different techniques for the ways that people hold the hand cards, the motions that they use, but essentially we're doing the same thing, which is we're scraping the teeth over the wool to open it up and get rid of any clumps so that we have a uniform sort of mesh of fibers that we can then roll up into a rowlag. Unlike combing, which creates yarn with a smooth surface, strong and resistant to abrasion, carding creates a fuzzy, textured yarn surface. This type of yarn is called woolen yarn. Woolen yarn is lofty and bouncy. The air that is incorporated into the yarn is insulating, and woolen yarn will be warmer than worsted spun yarn. When we spin a woolen yarn, the goal is not to squish the air out of the wool as we are spinning. We want it to remain fuzzy and full of air because that's the insulating part of this yarn. So what I'm going to do differently from how I spun my worsted yarn is that I am going to allow the twist in between my hands. In fact, sometimes I won't even be using my drafting hand at all. And as I let that twist in there, I will stretch and pull on the yarn, on the fibers, and that will draft them out to hopefully somewhat uniform of a diameter. Woolen yarn does tend to have a little bit more variation in diameter of the wool, of the yarn, and it can contain more slubs and little texture bits. Just like everything in spinning, there are always going to be some exceptions. Some rowlags are created on blending boards from combed wool, and people spin them worsted. Some people roll the fibers off the hand cards in the other direction, from side to side, which creates a more aligned direction in the fibers and can be used for worsted spinning. I will always encourage spinners to experiment and find out what works for you. I will show you the yarn that I spun in just a moment, but first, if you enjoy the videos that I make, if you have learned something from my videos, consider leaving me a super thanks or a tip through Ko-fi. And if you would like to support this channel, you can like the video, subscribe, and share the video with your fiber friends. And that's free. All right, here are my two samples of yarn. This one was spun from the combed fibers, and this one was spun from the carded rowlags. Overall, I think that having a set of hand cards and a set of combs is part of a complete collection of fiber processing equipment. However, expense, space, and safety considerations don't always allow for that. If you are deciding which tool to get, ask yourself what kind of yarn you use most and for what purpose. If you want to spin for warp in your weaving or knitted items that have a durable and smooth surface with more drape, then combs might be for you. Also, if the majority of what you plan to process is loaded with VM and shortcuts, look for a set of combs. If you enjoy bouncy, lofty, and warm fuzzy yarns for your weaving weft or knitted and crocheted sweaters, and if you like to work with shorter, blocky stapled wool like baby doll, for example, then hand cards might be for you. Let us know what you prefer to work with and why. Do you prefer hand cards or combs? I'll see you down in the comment section below. Happy spinning!